Welcome back to the Long View. I am Professor Zelizer. This is Office Hours, where I spend a little time with everyone, taking questions, sharing thoughts and commentary on what is on your mind. I'm waiting now. Everyone will join in. Always nice to see some familiar names now. It feels like there's a nice community here. And for those of you who are new and just joining, please feel free to send in some questions or thoughts on the chat below, and I'm happy to try to address them. As always, I like to announce a few things. I have a new piece in foreign policy today, and my column talks about the history of the Office of Management and Budget and how this became such a powerful office. There's been a lot on the current OMB director, hi Susan, and who is really a prime mover in a lot of what's taking place during the government shutdown and has been really front and center in terms of the cuts to the federal workforce and much more. Hi, KR from Birmingham. And I just take you through the history of how this office, which starts as the Bureau of the Budget in 1921 and will be reconfigured as the Office of Management and Budget in 1970 under President Nixon, how it gets the authority it does. And it's really in the 1980s is a seminal moment when David Stockman is the budget director under President Reagan, and the office starts to become a real center of political power. And so today, all OMB directors have been powerful, but it's part of this ongoing story where you see that the Trump administration is capitalizing on institutional power and mechanisms that have been there, sometimes exploited, sometimes not. And we need to understand this to really see the scope of what certain players like Vought are going to be able to do. So I hope those of you who are foreign policy subscribers enjoy that. Tomorrow, my newsletter will come out, and I'll leave the subject for all of you to see in the morning, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, Susan. Anyway, send in some thoughts. I think there's lots of issues. Obviously, we are now deep in a government shutdown, entering or in week 5, which is just unbelievable. Lots of effects are being felt, which is part of my newsletter tomorrow. Some of this has been felt already. I think anyone, I don't know, out there in Substack land, Longview fans, if you've tried to travel in certain airports, TSA workers who are not getting paid right now are really struggling, and the delays and the kind of conditions in the airports are terrible. Also, this weekend, 2 federal judges stopped the kind of cut to food stamps and have instructed the administration to find emergency funds to pay for food stamps, which are a basic source of nutrition for so many families in the country. But it's unclear how this is going to play out. It's unclear it covers all of the food stamps. There's going to be delays. The administration is already talking about waiting to see exactly what the court said, even though the courts have been quite clear. We don't know if this goes to the Supreme Court. There's other programs that are starting to come out. Good. I'm going to talk about that. Starting to come out. WIC is another program. Heating for low-income families is going to lose its funding, and it's really pretty devastating what we are watching. And what's devastating, and this gets to some of the comments I see coming through, is it's unclear where there is an end in sight. There was a little indication that Senator Thune, who must and will be feeling pressure, we need to remember that the effects of a government shutdown are not blue and red. It happens all over the country. And now more than ever, the Republican coalition has come to include a greater number of families than the Reagan coalition had, who depend on these kinds of government services. So you could be the most conservative MAGA Republican legislator. Your constituents are going to be feeling this more acutely. At the same time, ACA premiums are going to go up dramatically. They're going up. I don't know how many of you have followed the numbers. Real hit. Talk about inflation. This is inflation on steroids, what we are seeing now for families. And so all of this is coming together. It's unclear two things, and then I'll get to some of those thoughts. One is what is the end game here? We are not in your kind of historic rational actor negotiation anymore. As we were, say, in the mid 1990s, 95 and 96, when you had a shutdown. And even in some ways, in the first Trump administration, we are dealing with an administration that, yes, they have an eye on politics. I don't take that lightly. I think they do care. But at the same time, they're willing to go much, much further in uh, following through with this, allowing it to happen, and ultimately allowing government to be dysfunctional. And secondly, we are in a very different place with the media. I mean, I did a lot of work on the mid 1990s shutdown, and what is very notable when Speaker Gingrich and President Clinton are standing off is the sense of crisis that the shutdowns, there were two, generated within the media. And there was a lot of coverage of it, and there was a lot of coverage on a daily basis on TV and in print about the specifics of what was happening. And we do have some of that, but we are in a very different kind of moment where attention is a very valuable commodity and a difficult one to retain. We've talked about this before. I've mentioned Chris Hayes's book. And just following the news, it is notable to me that there are these moments like the potential for SNAP benefits to be cut that get a lot of coverage, but then it moves on very quickly. And there's so much going on. Some of it's because of the media. Some of it's because of, I think, how President Trump is very adept at kind of shifting conversation. But it changes the nature of a shutdown. And I think there are many Americans who don't yet feel the immediate impact in the same way, who are fine living with it as such. Um, that said, polls are showing people are frustrated. Polls are showing they blame the Republicans for this more than the Democrats. Kat, you asked how do Democrats explain it, and it's difficult. I think people who suggest there's great ease for Democrats to do this kind of it goes against the history of the party. This is a party committed to governing. This is a party committed to government benefits and the virtues of government. It's not a Reagan-esque party, even after all the changes in centrism that we've seen since the 1980s. So this is not an easy stand to do. I think Democrats are making certainly an accurate point that they have been trying to prevent this increase in ACA premiums. They want the subsidies that were put into place during COVID to continue. And they are fighting to control the costs that Americans are going to have to face, working Americans on a daily basis as a result of this increase. And I think that is the main argument. They did put aside other arguments, which I think are powerful. I mean, the other basic argument is Democrats need some guarantee from Republicans that whatever deal comes out of this will stick. And this was something that I think gets to the heart of what you hear at the protests and the No King's Day and more, that you're dealing with an administration that has either through executive power or via this thing called rescissions, where they lean on Congress to withdraw money they've already agreed to spend, going against deals that have been made. So how can Democrats now make a deal thinking in a couple months the president might essentially undercut everything that had happened? Those are the two arguments. And again, it's harder. There's an asymmetry between what Democrats and Republicans are willing to do in politics. I think the reason the Democrats, I talked about this a couple weeks back with Jonathan Cohen, have decided to focus on the healthcare. It is just an issue historically that when you're not talking about building a new program, that's always been tough, whether it was Harry Truman and national health care, whether it was Lyndon Johnson and Medicare, whether it was Bill Clinton and Obama with their respective healthcare programs does cause a lot of political turmoil. But when you're talking about retrenching existing benefits, Democrats just have a big advantage on that issue. And it's never really gone well for Republicans. President Trump learned this in 2017 when he tried to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. And a member of his own party, Senator John McCain, the late Senator John McCain, gave him a big thumbs down on the floor. And so I think that's where we are. But I guess historically, and please send in some questions. And I lost a couple as I was speaking. Happy to address whatever's on your mind. I think historically, what's just really notable to me is how this is not the kind of crisis it was, especially when these started to become a recurring part of American politics. And once they don't become a crisis, they are normalized. Once they normalized, we expect more of them in the normal course of politics. And I think it's extraordinarily damaging. Government should be something that commands enough respect that the functionality of our agencies, the functionality of benefits, should be something we can count on, even when the parties are fighting tooth and nail over specific policies. Too many people are affected by what is going on right now, and more will be affected in the weeks ahead. Some of you, someone asked earlier, and I'm sorry I missed the name, asked about the use of executive authority in military action and strikes against boats, which is it's a story. Certainly, people who follow politics have been paying attention to. Okay, Alan, good question, and let me get to that in a second. I think that's it's kind of, look, there's different stories that hold together the moment we are in, and will ultimately, years from now, be how we think of Trump 2.0, but certainly the kind of very aggressive extension of executive authority is a big one. And we're seeing it in different realms. So that deals, on the one hand, with impoundment and the way that the president circumvents congressional authorization. It also deals with the deportation program and the use of either federalized National Guard, or maybe we're hearing from the president, federal troops in cities. And it also has to do, obviously, with striking boats based on their being alleged drug shipments. We don't know. And usually that is done through due process and with a criminal apparatus as opposed to a strike. And I think all of this is part of a moment we are living in, everyone, where we talk about imperial power often in the imperial presidency. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. And I continue to hold this as more dramatic than what we have seen at this point. Okay, now the questions are coming, even with Richard Nixon. Alan asked about the deal, and I do think there is kind of. I was thinking about President Clinton in the mid 1990s, President Obama during a budget strike. Hold on, I'm just writing down a question. And it's notable how little engagement, from what we know, the president has had in forcing a resolution to this. And I think in some ways, he's literally been out of the country. It's unclear from reporting that we have how much he is focused on this. And Alan said there could be, look, the deal is clear. If the subsidies, Alan, on ACA are put into place, I think Democrats are willing to vote for reopening the government. And, ironically, Republicans have a huge incentive, as we said, to do this because it's their own constituents who are hurting. And this is the kind of moment presidential leadership really matters, especially, frankly, with a president who has such sway over his party. So we talk about that a lot. And I can't think historically in recent years of a president who has such command over his own party. Really, he is the party leader. There's few divisions. So if he wanted to engage, if he wanted to get involved, he could bring his party over to a deal at this point. They have the majority. He has floated the idea of getting rid of the filibuster. But a much kind of easier, low hanging fruit solution would be to accept this deal, to provide language that, shows he won't rescind this when it's done. And this is presidential leadership. So it's a mistake to just talk about this as a congressional issue. His absence is deliberate. And I think it is deliberate. I mean, Russell Vought has talked about using the shutdown consistently as a moment to go after government. So we will see. On the other hand, President Trump is a political person. I think it's wrong not to think of him that way. Um, and um, and so we will see. But Alan, the lack of leadership is very important. I think, Lynn, you are correct that there is a sense that you just open the government and everything's back to normal. It doesn't work that way. I mean, the erosion we've seen as shutdowns have become a normal part of politics since the mid 1990s in itself has hurt governing. I wrote a piece on this, that it's made shutdowns something we expect and something that are legitimate tools. When party leaders see that it can be used, it gets used again. And the Gingrich generation was really the first to introduce the tactic in the way that it's used. But we're far from that. I don't think a lot of legislators think there's so much that's unusual about that. And then there's the damage that's done to government agencies and government programs. One thing people don't talk about is how programs can erode even when they're still on the books. There's a lot of great work on the 1980s, and there was a political scientist named Paul Pearson who wrote a fantastic book called Dismantling the Welfare State. Now I'm going into academic writing. I hope everyone is interested a little bit. But he wrote a really terrific book, and it looked at England and the United States, and Pearson showed how even though under Reagan there was this huge push to dismantle government, actually very little got dismantled. Most policies stayed in place. The size of the government grew. In part within the US, there was just a lot of support for these programs. And it was different when people are asked, do you like government? Many Americans say no. When you ask about specific programs or when there's a threat they're going to go away, people act very differently. But then there were other scholars who said that is all true. But at the same time, there was a terrific article about this in a political science journal. And the argument was there's subtle ways in which programs erode. And so if you don't update the funding regularly, if you create uncertainty about closing and opening programs, it weakens the amount of money a program has as challenges mount. And Jacob Hacker wrote this article, actually, if I'm remembering correctly. And even the uncertainty itself makes it harder for administrators to really handle the problems they are responsible for. So I think you are right. I think that argument that this kind of in itself is already a huge hit to government on both levels that isn't quickly reversible is accurate. And I think if you are a supporter of government at some level and governing, there's going to be a lot of recovery work in the years ahead to get through what has happened in the last few years. Some of it connected to President Trump, some of it a much broader project that goes back decades. I would argue even to the Reagan years, where this erosion has been taking place. The New York City mayor, Faik, I think, asked me about kind of what does it say for the Democratic Party. I don't know. If that's my honest, I mean, I'm following it. And I think part of what you're seeing in the Democratic Party, this isn't simply about the New York race, Mamdani versus Cuomo. You're seeing it in the Virginia races and the New Jersey gubernatorial race. I think a lot of Democrats certainly feel that the party has hit a crossroads, that the 2024 election wasn't simply disastrous in itself, but it reflected a just broken state of the party where there weren't exciting ideas and leaders up top. This is a feeling, again, I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but I do think that is a sense. And that election was a focusing event, not so much because Vice President Harris did not win, but because ultimately this new generation of Republicans, the MAGA Republican movement, was triumphant despite everything. And I think you're just seeing in different parts of the country kind of efforts to figure out what might a new party look like, what might a different kind of party look like. And I don't think it has to be all the same. I mean, I'm not one to say, well, if it's a Mayor Mamdani in New York, that means that's what Democrats have to do all over, or take any race that you are following. I think really strong parties are often ideologically united, but coalitionally diverse. And there is an argument that's taking place now about the need for Democrats to think that way and to be more aggressive in reaching out to pockets of American society where they have basically not been working hard to win over votes, and also thinking of the map in a kind of more diverse way, not socially diverse, but politically diverse, and tailoring different candidates for different areas. And that's how I see what's going on. I think there's a lot of young people who are truly disaffected with certainly the state of both parties, but a lot of young Democrats are not enthused about where their party has moved. So I think that's part of the energy you're seeing. It's not even candidate specific, it's just the idea of something new and fresh and embodying the future. How it will play out, I don't know. We don't know what the outcome of the race will be. But a Mayor Mamdani would be facing a very difficult situation for sure. It's clear the administration is going to make New York a focal point. This brings back memories of the mid 70s when President Ford refused to give assistance to a financially struggling New York, which generated one of the most famous headlines in the New York Daily News. And we're going to see that again on steroids in terms of potential funding cuts in New York. So the challenges will be beyond immense for an already difficult and complicated job. And so part of it is who wins, and that's what everyone's writing about and thinking about. But part of it is what happens in the governing moment. So if he wins, and again, this really reflects any of the high profile Democrats running. If any of them win, how does the governing look in this environment with probably hostile administration using the leverage of federal funding to try to squeeze them? And we will see. But that governing job will answer part of your questions. And yes, KR, I think that's the sentiment that's driving a lot of the kind of new faces in the party. I have time for a few more questions. Thank you to all the subscribers for joining in. We have a great group this time, and it's been wonderful. You're joining in my different authors. I have a great author on Friday. I have a bunch of people. One I just want to note, John Witt, who wrote a really terrific new book about the Garland Fund, which was a fund of money, philanthropic money that in the early 20th century was given to various progressive causes. It's an incredible story. It spawned union kind of activism, civil rights activism, and much more. John's going to join me. Some of you might have seen this book about the fund on Friday. So thank you all when you join and send in your questions. And as always, if you are just a free subscriber, I hope you might consider becoming a paid subscriber to help finance this and keep all of this going and allow me to do everything that I am doing solo. I have no one helping me with all this. People ask, so your subscriptions are essential. So thank you for considering being a paid subscriber. Paid subscribers, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Oh, okay. Lynn is saying tune into the Chuck Todd podcast on covering the election tomorrow. That could be very interesting. I do. Oh, I wanted to. Sorry, I'm backtracking from the questions, but if on the Substack, the archives that I have from my podcast, last week, some of you might have caught. I interviewed Warren Zanes, who wrote the book that the movie about Bruce Springsteen is based on, Deliver Me From Nowhere. And it was a terrific conversation, really interesting. Warren is one of the best writers of rock and roll music and history that we have. He was also a musician, is a musician in Del Fuego's a terrific band. But it was a very thoughtful conversation about the book, about making it a movie, about that era of Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty in the 1970s and 80s, which is what I grew up with, and kind of what they offered music and how the music was changing from the 1960s. There's a little for all my Longview subscribers. I'm a big rock and roll fan from that generation, but I like a lot of new bands. If anyone ever wants to bring that in, we can go off road a little with the office hours. I'm happy to talk about some of my interests that way. Always fun, and you get a little insight into where I'm coming from. Okay, final comment I wrote down is someone wrote that we were talking about the lack of leadership from President Trump at this moment, the lack of urgency on solving the government shutdown. But I do think ultimately sorry, I didn't catch who said it, but it's a congressional story for sure. And too often I find in the coverage, certainly of President Trump, but I've seen this with other presidents, Congress is treated as if it's a passive institution. There are stories about Congress delegating power. There are stories about congressional gridlock, all of which are true. But at the same time, Congress makes a choice when it doesn't act. Congress still has lots of tools if the leadership wanted to act. If Senator Thune decided, hey, we have to kind of rein in the president of our own party, they have lots of power, from spending power, impeachment power, oversight power, and it's just a matter of using it. It's just actually a matter of, at this point, a few senators deciding to pressure the leader to do it. And so this is a proactive choice. It's not giving away power. The Republican leadership right now is not using its authority to end the shutdown. It's also not using its authority. It's allowing extensive executive power. It's empowering the president rather than just allowing the president to be powerful. So I think that is really an important point. And I think it will be important going into the midterms in terms of having a realistic assessment voters should have about what the different parties are doing. Anyway, thanks for joining the Long View. We got a lot of fun and interesting conversations ahead this week. Don't forget, at the end of the newsletter tomorrow, I list the schedule for all of this. And thank you all, my subscribers. You guys are amazing, and lots more to come. Bye-bye.